Hello and welcome back to In the Spotlight episode 2, the show where we discuss the daily footballing fixtures, talking about throwback fixtures, discussing the fixture history and different player spotlights and much more. Today, as always, we are joined by Junior. How are you doing, Junior?
I'm good, man. I'm excited for the second rendition of In the Spotlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And that first episode, it was great to record and it's been received really well. So we really appreciate the support and the feedback on our various channels. And without further ado, let's get straight in to today's week.
So before we get into Monday's topic, last week we touched upon our favourite Premier League goals. Make sure to go check out that episode if you haven't already. And we asked you guys to chip in with your favourite Premier League goals, and some of these were absolute belters. So the first one that got suggested by Jack Doe, thank you, Jack, was Di Canio's goal for West Ham against Wimbledon back in 1999. Now, Matt, this goal is so iconic that whenever someone does that move now, it's called the Decanio. And when you have a shot named after you like that, that's when you know it's iconic, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a few and far between goal because the technique to get a volley like that off. I love volleys in general. I think they're such an underappreciated and hard skill to master. But when you have players scoring from a tight angle and hitting the ball with the power which Paulo did, it is so iconic, as you say.
It's a beautiful goal, and I think the thing is as well, with the way the ball's coming over, it would have suited a left foot to volley that, but the fact that he's gone with his right foot back across the goal, it's just the technique is incredible. And yeah, Di Canio, what a player he was. So yeah, thank you, Jack Doe, for that suggestion.
The next goal up is an incredibly iconic goal, but not just an incredibly iconic goal, an incredibly iconic moment. Thank you very much to Josh Walker, who suggested Vincent Kompany's goal in the 2018-19 season. I don't think I need to say any more, but against Leicester City, with the title pretty much on the line, one touch in about the 85th minute, time running out, bang, top corner. Where do you want your statue, Vincent Company? Famously said by Gary Neville. I mean, the audacity and the ability to pull that off in the dying embers, Junior.
It's one of those where, I mean, we've seen it so many times in games where it's 0-0 or a team's 1-0 down. They're frustrated. They're playing against a team that are putting 11 men behind the ball, and they can't play. They want to. They can't play the way they want to play. So their centre back ends up having the ball 35 yards out, and they have a pop. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't go in. I think even Gary Neville on commentary was like, "Don't shoot," because that is just when you're frustrated. That's what you do. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't go in, but for this one, for Man City, the stars aligned and Company put it in the top corner. And yeah, what an incredible moment it was for City, for Company, who has given so much to that club as well. And yeah, they went on to win the title. So it was a massive, massive moment in Premier League history. So a great shout from Josh there. So the third and final goal we're going to show you today is Tony Yeboah's goal. We're going to go all the way back to 1996, the year I was born. What a year it was. Tony Yeboah's goal for Leeds against Wimbledon. This was suggested by Tim Chase. Another fantastic goal. It takes it on his chest. It's the chest touch and then off his knee, you think he's going to
Oh,
volley it then, and I think that's what does the defender because he then fakes and cuts inside, puts it in the top corner, and I mean, Yeboah's catalogue of goals is crazy. We could have just had an episode based on him, but this one in particular against Wimbledon was truly truly iconic. Matt, what were your thoughts of it?
I think, the two goals we've spoken about so far are incredibly iconic and incredibly difficult, particularly in the context. But to score a goal where everything is so fine margins based, you control a ball like that, you instantly get that shot off. The two touches is just unbelievable. The technique, the skill to execute that, and then to put that in the top corner as well. Phew.
Beautiful goal. Really, really beautiful goal. So that rounds off our goal segment. Thank you for suggesting those, but there will be plenty more questions for you guys throughout this episode, so make sure you stay tuned.
On to this week's action now, where we start on Monday with West Ham versus Wolves. Two sides struggling quite a lot in the Premier League, a massive game. But what we're more going to be focusing on is a player spotlight, but more so a celebration spotlight. So Robbie Keane, a very iconic Irish striker, not from Ivory Coast, a very iconic Irish striker, playing for both. And, he had a very iconic celebration. And the question I want to ask you, Junior, is do you feel that iconic celebrations are potentially coming a tiny bit more into fashion after a bit of time where they've been out slightly? You look recently at the likes of Cole Palmer's obviously cold celebration. You have Ronaldo's Sue, you have his calm down in the past, you have Haaland's peace yoga celebration, you have, even recently Gabriel Magalhaes's Batman-inspired celebration, you have Victor Gyökeres's celebration, mask celebration. Do you think that celebrations are slowly coming back into fashion? Do you think that's been a problem, that they've almost gone out? Not that it's, some incredibly concerning issue, but how do you feel about how celebrations are nowadays and the iconic celebrations there are?
I feel like they've quietened down a bit. I don't think they're as outrageous as they used to be. Like Robbie Keane, for example, like he does like a whole gymnastics spiel every time he scored. You look at Luar Luar as well, Portsmouth's Luar Luar, he would do like 3 or 4 backflips as well. Even in more recent times, Bafétimbi Gomez with the Panther celebration, that's one of my all-time favourites. That's
Oh,
brilliant. Or like the Tim Cahill corner flag punching. I don't know. I just feel like they're a bit more. I don't know, just a bit more calmer these days. There's not as much action going on. Maybe that's down to the managers saying like, "Look, I don't want you doing 15 flips and getting injured, or anything like that." But I think back in the day, the celebrations were a bit more iconic. Even like an Omri or a Drogba like knee slide was just that's like a good old fashioned, simple but effective celebration for me. Those ones. I mean, Drogba in particular, when he'd knee slide, he'd get to about 45 degrees his body. Like it just was ridiculous. But how about yourself? Like, what were your kind of favorite iconic celebrations?
I mean, it's an art celebrating, isn't it? The art of the knee slide. I remember Alexander
Mm.
Lacazette. I can't remember what game it was. I think it was against Liverpool, so I can remember. And he stopped literally just by the line. Love it. Obviously, Aubameyang's flip celebration is pretty
Yeah,
cool. And in the same vein, I think it was Emmanuel Mayuka for Southampton also did what you were talking about, with almost like the gymnastics routine and whatnot. I think a celebration which is always just so iconic, not really my favourite or anything, but so iconic, is Luis Suarez's dive right in front of David Moyes.
yeah.
You could not write it, and it's the exact type of character to do that. Jamie Vardy, who we spoke about last time, has his fair share of celebrations,
Yeah,
and
Vardy, to be fair, is one that's like he gets creative with his because he works out how he can best wind up the home fans if he's scoring away from home. So he's pretty brilliant with it.
he's committed to the cause. I mean, you remember the mannequin
Mm.
challenge as well, one from England.
Yeah.
But no, I think I love. I mean, for a very very biased perspective here, but in terms of probably my favourite celebration, I think it is the Saka, well, the Henry celebration, which Saka has recently done, or has recently done a few times in the last few years, going right up to the corner flag, putting his arm around it. Just it's, and I think for me personally, not to be like nonchalant, but I do quite like the nonchalant, like chilled out celebrations.
Mm.
But my favourite celebration, I don't remember the exact game here. I think it was a playoff game last year, an unbelievable comeback in the EFL leagues. It is running off after you've just scored a goal, completely just giving it your all and throwing yourself, sliding into that corner flag. It's amazing. I'll try attach it as we're speaking about it, but it's a phenomenal celebration, and that's probably my favourite celebration aside from the more nonchalant, Saka shrug against Liverpool and that type of thing. What if you had to pick one celebration, and everyone listening at home, let us know what your favourite celebration is. I think there's a lot of fun ones, and I'd even extend the question a bit more. If you were to score in a professional game like this, how would you celebrate? And
Oh, great question.
Junior, what's your, if you have to pick one celebration, what's it? Let's hear it. How would you
I,
celebrate?
I, oh, how would I celebrate? I'm not too sure. Do you know what? Actually, one of my favorites is Dybala's, like just the
Oh,
little like hand gesture he does over his face. I don't know why. I think I just love Dybala as a player as well. But that one was always like iconic for me, like a more recent one. And then I don't know why this one always sticks in my head, but it was I think when United played away at Arsenal. And they were in their all black kit, and I think Jesse Lingard scored, and he dropped the
oh,
Millie Rock, and it's like 3 or 4 of his players just round him, and it was a cold moment. It was a really cold moment. So yeah, those two stick out for me. But yeah, let us know in the comments what your favorite player celebration is, and if you scored a goal, what would your celebration be? So Tuesday takes us to the Champions League, where RB Salzburg host PSG in one of the fixtures I want to point out, and we're going to go into a team focus here. Because Matt, what I want you to do is it's quite well known that Salzburg have had quite a lot of big names come through their team and are now playing for some of Europe's biggest teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 players that have come through Salzburg's ranks, and you're going to blind rank them.
Ooh.
5 being the worst, 1 being the best in their prime. Okay,
Oh, this is going to be tough. This can go horribly wrong or very well. So why not? Sounds fun.
that's the magic of blind ranking. Okay, so the first name I'm going to give you is Karim Adeyemi.
Ooh.
Now at Borussia Dortmund, of course, the German midfielder. Very good midfielder. I'm a big fan of his. We did. Oh, do you know? I'm gonna go off. Is it? Whose celebration is that? Serge Gnabry celebration, by the way, for the celebration
Ooh.
talks. Before that celebration for me is like one of my favorites actually, where he's just like mixing the pot. Class celebration.
Top. I think Adeyemi is a safe bet to go fourth or fifth. You know, he's a good young player, very exciting, quick winger who's relatively intimidating. But I'm going to go fifth because I know Salzburg have produced some incredible names. So I'm going to go fifth. I think
Big
that's safe.
call putting him last. Okay. Okay, next up, I'm going to give you Sadio Mane. So now playing in the Saudi League, obviously a little bit past his prime, but big player back in the day for Southampton and Liverpool.
I think we're talking primes. It's got to be first. I think there's a lot of top names. Don't get me wrong, and that could come to backfire. But I think you're talking about one of the most lethal forwards in Premier League history. Incredibly intimidating. You know, you're playing him, you're very scared to. I remember some of the games he's had against my side Arsenal. They're not very fun a lot of the time, and he just has everything. You know, pace, power, incredibly just lethal and a difference maker.
Very good player indeed. One of the Premier League's best actually. Probably one of the most underrated in terms of how good he actually was. So Mane's going in at number 1. That's big. So you've filled up the top spot and the bottom spot already. Okay.
Yep.
Third name, sorry, I'm going to give you is another Liverpool player, current Liverpool player, Dominic Szoboszlai. Hungarian midfielder, kind of hitting his prime now with Liverpool.
I'm quite happy with this so far. I think third or fourth I'd probably go fourth because I think maybe if you're talking about signing him from Leipzig there and then, where, you know, the general perception of him was incredibly high, even at Salzburg. I remember he was linked with a host of top clubs, almost likened to De Bruyne a tiny bit. I think what I've seen at Liverpool is a player with a brilliant engine, but a player who isn't quite as lethal in the final third as I would have or expected to see. So I think fourth I will go with, but that's also knowing that there's a lot of top names. Once again, that can backfire. That's the fun of blind ranking, but I'll go fourth.
Okay. So Szoboszlai is in at 4. Okay, the fourth name I'm going to give you is another attacker, Benjamin Šeško.
Ooh, I like that.
Slovenian forward at Leipzig.
I'm very happy with this list. I'm easily going to go third here because I think second opens up for a very, you know, there could still be a top player, and I think being better than Mane is going to be very unlikely, and being better than Šeško is plausible. You know, like a very exciting, explosive young forward, raw but incredibly exciting, ridiculously tall. The way he hits that ball is ridiculous. So much power.
Yeah, his technique's great. A lot of potential in him. I know he's getting a lot of eyes on him, especially this season.
Probably one which Arsenal revisit as well, having tried to sign him last summer. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, third place for me.
So that means in your second place ranking, it's controversial. It's Erling Haaland.
Oh, I think I've done brilliantly with that list. I think that's perfect.
You think Mane's above Haaland?
Easily. Prime-wise, easily for me. Like, easily is maybe crazy to say, but I think the player Mane was at Liverpool, ridiculously strong, powerful. And
that's a big call.
Haaland, obviously, you know, he's the Terminator himself, isn't he, really? You know, so powerful, very intimidating. The goal records he's already broken is just ridiculous. But I think Mane, for me, particularly longevity-wise, ranks as one of the very best wingers in Premier League history, whereas I don't quite think Haaland's been given that amount of time to be up there yet, personally. But I think first and second, you know, if I was to do it in no order, I genuinely think I would go the exact same order. So I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe third and fourth swapped, but yeah.
I think for me, I would have put Adeyemi ahead of Šeško. I really rate Adeyemi. So I'm a big fan of his. But let us know in the comments. Do you agree with these 5 rankings, and how would you change it? But for me, I mean, in terms of like, we're going to talk about Salzburg just a little bit more. The players that have come through their team. I mean, I think it was 2005 they got bought by the Red Bull company, and yeah, the players they've produced, like Brendan Aronson now at Leeds, Patson Daka, the Leicester striker, Naby Keita. Who else we got here? Seewald, who's a Leipzig midfielder, young midfielder. He's actually very, very good. One to look for the future. Upamecano, now at Munich, of course, the centre back. I mean, they've produced a lot of players. He Chang Wang, the Wolf striker. A lot of players have come from this team, and for Salzburg, obviously, they have a lot of quality, but they also produce, even though they sell. I think before last season, they had won the Austrian Bundesliga 10 years in a row. So they're obviously doing something right over in Austria. But Matt, how do you feel about clubs that are kind of seller clubs? They're kind of clubs where, like your Brightons and your Southamptons, where players go to build up a reputation and then get a big money move.
I think I view them in an interesting way. I think, they know their place. They almost know their place in the food chain. I mentioned Bournemouth and Spurs last week with Dominic Solanke, where it kind of just gets a bit inevitable that a top 6 club can mop in and take your best player. But that's the reality of it. Like I'm sure Dortmund would have loved to kept, or would have loved to have kept Erling Haaland or Jadon Sancho or any of those type of names. But it's also the reality knowing that players like Jude Bellingham are few and far between. And the more that clubs like Dortmund or like Brighton or like Ajax, etc., are seen as a club where players can develop at, the more that they will attract a type of player which other clubs won't be able to attract. So if a player joins a team like Brighton, it's because they think it's the best development move for themselves. It might not be because they think they'll be there for the long, long term, even though it's a brilliant club and they're operating incredibly well. But I think there's that incentive. Whereas if Brighton signed a player and then suddenly stop them moving, that's going to have other players think twice about joining Brighton in the future. So I think it's almost part and parcel of the quality they're at, almost like Bologna last season, with Joshua Zirkzee, Riccardo Calafiori and other names. And it's almost just how it is, and the perception they have is what makes them a huge selling club, in my opinion.
Yes, I mean, honestly, a very good point. You've absolutely nailed it there. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, yeah, let us know in the comments which was your favourite player from that list that Salzburg have produced. So, Wednesday takes us again into the Champions League. Atletico Madrid hosting Slovakian side Bratislava. But what we're going to be doing is going into a match flashback. We're going to take it back all the way to 2010, where Atletico Madrid took on none other than Fulham in the Europa League final. Now, this game, it was big for Fulham. They were looking for their first European title. It was the first year that the Europa League had become the Europa League after it was formerly known as the UEFA Cup. And Atletico Madrid beat them 2-1 in what was a really good game, actually. Diego Forlan scored a brace. He won it in extra time as Atletico Madrid claimed their second European title. But Matt, I'm going to name a couple of the players that were on the pitch that day because some of them became big players after that their period at Atletico Madrid. Some of them were already big players. But in goal, can you guess who the 19-year-old Spaniard was in goal for Atletico Madrid on that day?
It's got to be a certain David De Gea, surely.
It was David De Gea, yes. Just 19 years old, won a Europa League competition with Atletico Madrid. And then up front, I mean, they had a big trio. Diego Forlan, Sergio Aguero, who went on to become one of the Premier League's greatest strikers, and Jose Antonio Reyes, obviously someone that you all know quite fondly, a big Arsenal player back in the early 2000s as well. For Fulham, sorry, they had a few big players in there as well, captained by Danny Murphy, Bobby Zamora up front as well, and they had a really good run through this European competition. They actually, in the last 16, I think it was, they beat Juventus 5-4 on aggregate. They beat them 4-1 in the second leg to overturn a 3-1 deficit to book their place in the final. But yeah, this one, I mean, can you imagine where we might have been now if Fulham had won that European competition back in the day? They might have been one of the consistent top 4 teams, although they are pushing for a European spot this season. What are your thoughts on Fulham this season and what could have been for them?
I've got a massive soft spot for them. Probably doesn't tell you it's probably quite obvious why that is the case. But
Arsenal's B team, yeah.
yeah, pretty much. And obviously got Bernd Leno in goal. And then you've got Alex Iwobi, who's been a revelation for Fulham. Emil Smith-Rowe obviously joining from Arsenal for £30 million. Reece Nelson on loan. And, you're just bringing the band back together, really. And it's great fun to watch a side which is so infested with Arsenal youth players who I used to love watching. Emil Smith-Rowe I have a huge soft spot for. Alex Iwobi I really like. Reece I always appreciate as a player quite a bit. And then also you then combine that with Raul Jimenez getting back to not his best, but the technical level, that assist against Man City, for example, was just incredible. And
Yeah, class.
it's just, it's so good to see. At the same time, we didn't win a single game against them last season. So, it's not completely ideal in that regard. But no, I've been very impressed with them. I think Marcus Silva's continued to show why he's a brilliant coach. Very well organised side, very fun side to watch. Easily should have got something at the Etihad before, obviously. They've gone into slight free fall. And just a really good side.
Do you think that they can reach those peaks of finding Europe again? Obviously, there are more European spots available these days than there were back then, but there are more sides competing. You don't just have the traditional top four. You have the likes of Brighton, Fulham, Newcastle up there competing as well.
The biggest problem is, as you say, the likes of Fulham, Brighton, Newcastle, etc., is the quality of the Premier League. I think the level is as high as it's ever been. You look at the state of some of the teams in the Premier League, and you look at even teams like Brentford with Brian and Buemo, Bournemouth with Antoine Semenyo and a whole host of other good players, Brighton who have an attack which is probably better than a lot of teams in Europe. And it almost just speaks volumes about the quality of the league you're dealing with. Even players like Tyler Dibbling playing for a relegation side. Stefan Mavrididi's a good player for Leicester. Fatawu as well. I can't remember which one, unfortunately, got injured. But, principle-wise, you just have so many top players, or so many very good, exciting young players who play all across the division. And West Ham's another example of a team with a lot of quality who are down there. But it just shows the quality of the Premier League, really. Thursday brings us on to Czech Republic in the Europa League, when Manchester United travel to face Victoria Plzeň. And this is going to be a player spotlight, and a player who, very surprisingly, the fact he is 27 feels really surprising, but a player who I am personally a huge fan of, and that is Marcus Rashford, a player who does incredible things off the pitch. A player who, sometimes gets overly scapegoated, has also not gone through the best of times and has stagnated a tiny bit on the pitch, but also looks to be discovering, some of his best form potentially. A goal against Ipswich, a brace against Everton. What do you make of Marcus Rashford, particularly now under Ruben Amorim Jr.?
Well, obviously, we're in very, very, very early stages. We're only seeing him play a couple of games. Obviously, by the time this episode comes out, he would have played midweek against Arsenal and a weekend game. So I guess we'll see if his form continues. But the player that we saw last weekend against Everton looks like someone who could thrive under Amorim's attacking style. It looks like maybe he was kind of restricted under Ten Hag and maybe not enjoying his football. And as you said, he's been a scapegoat for United and for England as well quite a lot of times. But I would love for him to find his form again. I mean, it's crazy to me that he's 27 now. It feels like just yesterday he was breaking onto the scene for United. But if you actually look at his record, 138 goals in 423 games is just under one every 3 games, which for a player who is traditionally a winger, really, that's a very good record. So I can definitely see him thriving and finding a new lease of life, and potentially, who knows, getting back into the England side if Amorim kind of clicks with those players.
Absolutely, and as you say, it is early days, and obviously the Rashford which came on the scene is vastly different to the Rashford now, but that's going to happen. Particularly how much he played football earlier on, even the first season under Ten Hag, how much he flourished there. Obviously under Ole, some of the famous partnerships he created, like with Anthony Martial. And yeah, I just think he's a player for me personally, and I'm not sure if you agree, but he's a player particularly with the off-field side of things and the way he often gets scapegoated, you want to see do really well.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, football aside, the what he's done for charity, for helping feed millions of kids, especially during a really tricky periods for everyone, really, it is admirable, and yeah, that it kind of makes you like the player even more. And for fans like us who obviously aren't United fans, you do kind of root for him a little bit because you like to see him with a smile on his face again, enjoying his football because you can tell that hasn't been the case recently. But hopefully for Marcus Rashford, he does start to click under Amorim.
Only thing though is, can you please, obviously as you said at the time of recording this, we will have seen, but hopefully he doesn't score yet again against Arsenal because he is one of the single players I'm most intimidated against playing. So strong, so quick, and a lethal ball striker, and he always seems to translate that against Arsenal.
Friday takes us across the border to Ligue 1, where Toulouse hosts Saint Etienne, two sides that in recent times have played in the French second tier. But a team that I want to touch upon is a side that have had a bit of a rough time recently. Bordeaux, one of France's biggest and most historic clubs, have recently fallen into tough times and have been relegated down to the fourth tier of French football after suffering some financial issues during COVID. Obviously, I think it was the company that had the TV rights to broadcast League R. I think they actually went bankrupt, so a lot
Yep.
of French clubs weren't making any money, and obviously with no fans in the stadiums, loads of clubs had issues. But one club that was had more issues than most were Bordeaux, and they struggled massively in the 21-22 season. They finished bottom and were relegated. And then, because of more financial issues and bankruptcy, they actually had to be relegated down to the fourth division of French football. They scrapped their rights as a professional football team. They closed the facilities. They terminated players' contracts. And it's really sad to see for a side who, in the early 2000s, were playing the Champions League. They were in Europe
Oh,
multiple years. They won multiple French Cups. They won the league and cup double in the 08-09 season. So for them now to be playing in the fourth tier in front of a couple hundred fans with as a non-professional club, it's quite sad to see, really. I mean, yeah, obviously a few clubs in England have suffered this fate as well. What are your thoughts on Bordeaux situation, Matt?
I think it's really sad, as you say, for any football fan, the last thing they'd ever want to factor in is their club, really struggling in that type of manner. And it's sad, obviously, as you say, particularly with a historical club like Bordeaux and, the quality and everything like that they possess. And it just shows how badly, not how badly things can go wrong, but how things can change. And yeah, hopefully clubs do get the support they need, because I think the Liga in general is a brilliant league. I think it's always been the home of a lot of top talent. We spoke about Salzburg earlier on and the exports which come from there, but the exports which come from Liga and even PSG's academy, the likes of Christopher Nkunku and many others. You've got so many top names, and it would be great if things can be sorted out and we can watch a great league, which also, as I say, a lot of exports do end up moving to, especially the Premier League. And I think the way, obviously, French football in general is so prevalent and always has been. And I think it's the way they get trained, which is why it's so unique. The way that it's almost such a focus on technical ability and close control. I think that's why you see so many players like Kusama Aouar or Tanguy Ndombele. But rounding up, it is obviously very sad, and hopefully teams can get back to where they want to be.
Well, it's not all doom and gloom for Bordeaux. They are now on their redemption arc. If you're a football manager player, a great club to take over and bring back some glory days. But for Bordeaux now, they're playing in the fourth division. It's a tough division to get out of. Only one team gets promoted, but they've started well: 4 wins, 5 draws, and 1 defeat in their 10 games so far. And some of the stories that are coming out from this team's season, it's crazy. I hope Netflix or someone is doing a documentary on them because it's going to be great. The first game they played, 94th minute, they're 1-0 down. They have a free kick and their goalkeeper scores a header to snatch a point for them in their first game in the division as a non-league club. And then famous Barclays man Andy Carroll has signed for them this season, and he has gotten off to a flyer. 7 goals and 1 assist in their 6 league games. I remember seeing a video of him scoring a brace. I think it was a couple of headers. So for me, I hope Bordeaux are able to rise through the ranks again and get themselves back up into the French top division, where I believe they belong. So Saturday takes us into a team focus where we're going to look at Bolton v Wigan. Now, about 10 or 15 years ago, between 2006 and 2010, this was a regular Premier League fixture where in that time Bolton actually played in the UEFA Cup as well, and just a year or so later Wigan would go on and win the FA Cup and play in the Europa League. Fast forward to today, and these two teams are battling for bragging rights down in League One. So, Matt, I want to ask you, a lot of clubs have been in the Premier League, have dropped down to the Championship, League One, even League Two. What sides, what ex-Premier League sides would you like to see back in the top flight?
It's a very good question. I think it's kind of difficult to answer without giving a bit of a basic, boring answer. But I did, Sunderland, I feel like are just a really iconic side to have in the Premier League. I feel like Blackburn scream Premier League as well. There's often been
Yeah, I like the Blackburn shout.
there's often been like the discourse about like what makes your ideal Premier League table, and I think people get a bit too disrespectful or go a bit too over the top with some of the Premier League clubs who are incredibly well run, who maybe weren't in it 5 to 10 or 10 years ago. But I like the idea of Blackburn and I like the idea of Sunderland, and then it's a good question. It is a very good question. I think those two definitely, and then I don't know why, but I just quite like the idea of Leeds in the Premier League. I feel like they bring that like chaos, obviously that Bielsa time of things. I'm sure, things are far different now. I know they're doing really well in the Championship and just missed out on getting promoted last season. And they're the type of team where it's probably inevitable that they're back up very soon. But I just feel like they bring that like chaotic, intriguing nature to the league, almost like unpredictability. Those teams who you feel like maybe they could go beat one of your big six rivals, which makes for interesting viewing. And as I say, maybe that shout's a tiny bit biased with Marcelo Bielsa, but obviously they haven't also had their fair share of big names like Eric Cantona, Rio Ferdinand, etc., and the side they used to be. So those are probably my three if I had to nail down three. What about yourself?
I like those shouts. I like them because they're, I don't know, for me as well. I think that those teams kind of were prime Premier League teams when we were growing up. Perhaps Leeds not so much, but Leeds I think are one of those teams where they have a lot of rivalries as well. I mean, like them and Chelsea hate each other, so whenever they face off, it's a great game. They've got great fixture history with Man United. Sunderland being in the Prem, those fans up there, they absolutely love football, and Sunderland Newcastle derby, like why would you not want to have that in the top flight? Blackburn as well. I love that Ewood Park's a proper old school Premier League stadium for me. So yeah, big fan of Blackburn. But for me, I always have a soft spot for Portsmouth.
I like it.
Big fan of like the Harry Redknapp days. Obviously, they won the FA Cup when they had Crouch, Defoe, James, Boateng, Campbell, like so many ballers in their team. Nico Kranjčar. Yeah, so that kind of Portsmouth era for me again, Fratton Park, proper old school stadium. So yeah, I'd love to see Portsmouth up there. They're another team that have dropped down to League One in recent times, but they're in the Championship now. So yeah, a lot of teams obviously they go through the struggles of dropping down the divisions. You've got teams that have done the opposite. Brighton and Bournemouth have come from the lowest leagues to come all the way up to the Prem. But what I'd like you guys to comment down below is which ex-Premier League sides would you like to see back in the top flight?
The final day of this episode, Sunday, Manchester City versus Manchester United, an iconic fixture to say the least, the Manchester derby. One team which has been significantly more successful than the other, but our time's changing with Ruben Amorim, and City going through a tiny bit of a slump. Time will tell. But what we want to go through is the fixture history between these sides, and there's been some brilliant ones. And I'll start off with in 2011, the iconic Balotelli celebration. We spoke about celebrations earlier on. We didn't really talk about unveiling, messages under your top of why always me when you make it 6-1 or, the game ending 6-1 to the away side at Old Trafford. Iconic, to say the least. Then you have the Michael Owen winner, obviously Ballon d'Or winner, playing for Real Madrid beforehand. Joined United controversially after playing for Liverpool. Gets the winner in a pretty manic game at Old Trafford. The 93rd minute winner, to be exact, after Craig Bellamy equalised in the 90th minute, which is just complete chaos, isn't it, really? Then you have more recently, you also even have, to give you an idea of how many iconic games there are, you have the game where, obviously we spoke about Van Persie last week, Van Persie where he scored the winner directly from a free kick at the Etihad on his debut in that fixture. And then you also had Paul Pogba scoring a brace to come back from 2-0 down for United to win the game 3-2, which is very iconic again, the blue hair. But the final two fixtures we're going to focus on, and I will get your opinion, do not worry, Junior. But the two fixtures we're going to focus on are, if you will, the turn of the tide type of games. The ones where City thumped United 6-3. Phil Foden got a hat trick. Erling Haaland got a hat trick. Two, it just what more is there to say, Junior?
I mean, it was a crazy game, that one in particular, the 6-3. It was very back and forth, very open. And even though United conceded six, it still felt like they could get back into that game somehow. Such is just the nature of a local derby. Kind of form goes out the window. But yeah, that one, Foden and Haaland kind of really putting their names on this fixture's history. And then just a year later, well, in the same season, at the end of that season, June 2023, the FA Cup final, the two teams met for the first time in a few decades, I think it was. And Gundogan scored after just a minute. I think it was like 20 odd seconds or something that he scored,
Yep.
which set off City. They went on to win the game 2-1. So City have definitely had bragging rights in recent years, but as you said, they've been struggling a bit, and United have the long term history. So overall, I'd probably still say it's advantage United for now, but that is quickly changing.
Well, speaking of change, what about players who went from Manchester United to Manchester City, or vice versa? Players where it's almost unforgivable or unfathomable that you'd cross to the other side of Manchester. But there are a few, and I'm going to reverse you from what you did earlier, Junior, with the blind ranking and give you your own blind ranking, except this time, in the name of controversial crossovers, I'm going to ask you to rank them based off controversy
Ooh,
of the move.
okay.
So, without further ado, let's start with Andy Cole, a Premier League legend. Where's he ranking?
Oh, Andy Cole. I think he I think he had a massive impact to United. He was part of the team, part of the treble winning team, part of, some of the greatest United teams in those late 90s. And then I think he went to City. If I'm not mistaken, he went to City a bit later on. I don't think he made the switch from United to City like straight away. I think there were clubs in between. So I feel like this
Correct.
one wasn't that controversial. I'm gonna put this. Hmm, I'll put it at a three. I'll put it midway.
Interesting. I mean, as you say, he was so prolific for United, and obviously to go to City a few years later, not revealing too much information because there's so many limited options in this
Yeah.
list, it makes more sense to just see where you're at
Yeah.
with it and go from there. The next name, a bit of a loophole, but we're going with it. Jadon Sancho, new Chelsea signing, presuming they don't finish 13th, which doesn't seem likely. Where's he going?
Oh, I think the fact that cause I don't think he made a first team appearance, did he? I think he was just part of the youth team. Did he make like one appearance if he made an appearance, it was like one or two. So I don't think this one's that controversial at all. It hasn't really had a great time at United either, so I'm going to put this one fifth. I'm going to put it last, as least controversial.
That's fair enough. I think, with a few of these, you almost forget that they've played for both
Mm,
teams. So the controversial element, I think there'll be one or two names where you're like, wow, that's
yeah.
controversial. But generally speaking, it's difficult. The next name, Owen Hargreaves, now a pundit, a phenomenal player for Man United, who also played for both sides. Where's he going?
Hargreaves is a tough one because I feel like he was a good player for United, but I feel like his big days were in Germany for Munich. And where am I going to put Hargreaves? I think I'm going to put Hargreaves in fourth. Again, I don't think it's that crazy. I think just because he was a decent player for United, but I don't think he was a massive player for either. So I'm going to put Hargreaves in fourth at the moment. So I'm hoping that the top two are like pretty controversial. I've left those two spots open.
I think you've done this quite well. I think it's, obviously the fun of blind ranking. And you mentioned that you don't think Hargreaves was too controversial, despite joining City, apologies, directly from Manchester United. He played one game for Man
Yeah.
City, and that was pretty much the last game he played in his career. So make that what you will. The final two names, one is certainly very controversial,
Okay.
but we will start with Peter Schmeichel.
Okay. So Schmeichel's a tough one. Again, part of that same team that Andy Cole won the treble with them in '99. A massive player for Man United, one of the greatest goalkeepers the Premier League's ever seen. And the fact that he had, I mean, again, I don't think it was direct from Man United to Man City. I think he even went abroad to like Portugal and then came back to the Premier League, and then went to City. So I don't think it's great that he went there, and I think there are a couple of sour grapes for some fans, but I think most United fans still kind of have a soft spot for him just because of the role he did play in those iconic years for Man United. So I'm gonna put him in second. I still think it is pretty controversial. I'll put him in second. I will keep that number one spot open.
Before I give you number one, which is ultimately the most controversial by far, so you've done very well
Yeah.
there. I want to ask you if Peter Schmeichel or a player of that ilk was to have moved between City and United today, do you think, particularly in the media, it would still be regarded as really controversial, despite, if you look at a player with the legacy Peter Schmeichel had, you say that you don't feel it's too controversial because there are a few clubs in between. Do you think that nowadays that'll be looked at slightly differently?
I think it'd actually be less controversial now. I feel like
Really?
I think rivalries. I think they're still big these days, but they just felt bigger back then. I think, and it was almost back in the day. You see these stories of like Roy Keane and Vieira like they hating each other, and you would have teams that hated each other, and that was kind of like famous of why England perhaps struggled even though they had such an incredible roster of players, was because they were in a time where like those players didn't like playing against each other. So then when you link up for national duty, it's a bit, I don't know, it's just hard to click. Whereas these days players are a bit more pally. You see players kind of going from team to team, and I just think transfers are more common these days. That I think it was more controversial back in the day to join a rival than I think it would be now.
Interesting, and that leads us on to the most controversial player on the list. It's not that it really makes a difference with the blind ranking, but Carlos
Yeah,
Tevez, the Argentine forward, crossing from Manchester United to City, well, only on loan at United, but he played quite a few games there, and then directly after that loan spell was at Manchester City for 4 years. And I think you've done quite well to save the number one spot
yeah.
for him.
For me, he's the most controversial one. Yeah, going from United to City is, I think he was the first player to do that for since the 90s. So that's never going to go down well. And he had a decent spell at United. Obviously, a very talented striker. He had a bigger spell at City. He was more influential in the blue side of Manchester. But that one, yeah, I know it didn't go down well with United fans. And he was involved in a few of the. He was involved in that 4-3 game, I think, where Owen scored the late winner. But he also won a couple of trophies with City as well. So maybe he had the last laugh. Who knows?
So many iconic players he played with for both sides, but that wraps up that segment. That wraps up today's show, to be honest. Been a pleasure, as always, Junior. A lot of really interesting discussion points, ranging from, different perspectives of Europe, obviously youth academies. We've introduced some games. If you guys watching have any questions or things you'd like us to discuss more to the point, whether that's upcoming fixtures, player spotlights, fixture history, you want us to focus on your team, as usual. Also, we will be discussing some of the answers from today's show. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, as always, to Junior for joining us. And hope you enjoyed watching. Like and subscribe to the Striver TV channel, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.